Okay, this is a reaction video. This is from the World According to Briggs. Please click like, share, and subscribe for him, and please click like, share, and subscribe for me. 10 USCs that are going downhill in 2022 and 2023. Let's see what this is all about, okay? Because I'm sure there's a lot of cities that are going down, but we'll find out what he's getting on about.
Are you looking for a new city in 2023? If you are, like I said in the state version of this series, you're not alone. 2023 is predicted to be one of the most active years for relocation on record. In this video, I'm going to tell you which cities you should probably avoid. As we slowly come out of the pandemic, a lot of cities have started to turn things around. Every city, large and small, took a real hit over the last few years because of the pandemic. Some, in my opinion, have set themselves up for success post-COVID. Others, not so much. Some of these cities are dealing with old problems that have gotten worse while picking up some new ones. And those are the cities we're looking at, the ones that will be getting worse in 2023. Now, I'm sure some of you are going to say, what about this city? What about this city? And like San Francisco or Chicago. I think a lot of cases, some of those have already hit rock bottom.
Yeah, I mean, if you really want to get down to it, cities like San Francisco, Los Angeles, Chicago, New York City, they have bad reputations already. Their reputations are getting worse because they don't seem to care a whole lot about crime, at least the people who are in charge there. And that's take that for what it's worth. But I'm kind of curious to see what cities he has on here.
And they can really only go up. This isn't the worst city list. This is cities I think will be getting worse. Keep that in mind. But this video is my opinion based on information that I've been taking in over the last year. Are these cities 100% horrible? No. Will they struggle in the next year and probably beyond? I think so. If you think I listed a city that shouldn't be on this list, I'd love to hear about it in the comments section below. These are just my opinion and why. Unless you're just a troll, I'm sure you have some valid opinions.
You know, people get upset on some of these videos because he may name their city and they may think, their city is bliss and the greatest city known to mankind. And that, everybody has different opinions and you're entitled to yours. So if he names one of your cities, you may name my city for all I know. For all it is what it is.
Got it.
I think that's my favorite statement whenever I do these. It is what it is.
Get it? Good. Let's take a look. Number 10, Houston, Texas.
I've been through Houston. It is a big city.
Yes. Of all the major cities in Texas, Houston's the one that's like nobody wants to move to. Now, people are moving there, so don't quote me on it, but it's just not as popular as the other ones. And for good reason. Houston kind of blows. Over the last 6 years...
It kind of blows. Well, I didn't think it blows, but it wasn't that bad.
Houston's crime rate has continued to grow. Their schools don't get the best marks, and their poverty level in Houston is 45% higher than the national average. I'd give you their exact, unemployment rate, but it changes so often, it's just safe to say that it's between 8 and 10% higher than the national average most months. There's a lot of cool things to do and see in Houston, don't get me wrong. It's just these days the crime rate and some of their other stats are just keeping people away and driving people out. And it's too bad. Texas has a lot of places that are doing good and getting better. Dallas-Fort Worth metro area, San Antonio area, Austin's one of the most popular places to move to right now.
There's a lot of great places in Texas. My parents love the Riverwalk in San Antonio. Dallas is a nice city. My dad was born in El Paso. It has its charms. But yeah, I get there are certain things that are going downhill in the United States. Some of these cities are.
El Paso's pretty good. I'd move to Amarillo before I'd move to Houston. And not because I'm a dirt field enthusiast either. They ranked 150 of the largest cities in the United States on different categories. And one stuck out to me about Houston was their quality of city services. Out of 150 cities, they're ranked 126th.
That's terrible. Especially if you don't know anything about Houston. I mentioned New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, and San Francisco, but the three biggest are New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago. I think Houston's the fifth largest of those cities in the United States.
Number 9, Philadelphia. There's a lot of...
Yeah, Philadelphia is the city of, they call the city of brotherly love. Well, there's not a lot of... They boo Santa Claus in Philadelphia.
Pros when it comes to Philadelphia. It's just got a lot more cons these days. Speaking of cons,
but they make great cheese sticks.
Crime rate's growing too. I mean, it's a major city and you can't expect it to have perfect crime or below average crime. That's just how big cities are. But their violent crime rate has been growing the last few years. It's actually right now 134% higher than the national average. Is that the worst in the United States? No. Is it pretty scary? Yes. If you want to see something that is alarming, YouTube or Google Kensington, and it's a neighborhood in Philadelphia that is just filled with homeless and drug addicts. It is so bad, there are third world slums that look better than Kensington. Remember that service stat I just talked about for Houston? They're actually worse than Houston. They're ranked 129th in the nation. Now, there are some wonderful areas of Philadelphia. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, there's wonderful areas in pretty much every place you go. Well, maybe a few that maybe not have as many, but especially in the United States. But yeah, I can understand where he's coming from here.
I mean, every city has these. I mean, except for the one that's right across the river from Philadelphia, Camden, New Jersey. Yeah, that place is bad all the way around, and I think that helps bring down some of Philadelphia's stats. Number 8, Jacksonville, Florida. Jacksonville.
Now, I have a friend who I worked with moved down to Jacksonville, and he loves it. He thinks Jacksonville is one of the best places he's ever lived.
It's one of those places you never really hear about unless you're an NFL fan, or if you live in Florida. I haven't visited Jacksonville probably in about 5 or 6 years, but I've been there like 3 or 4 times, and I've been very
I've been through Jacksonville a couple times. My parents live in Melbourne, which is south of Jacksonville. And if I drive down there, I go through Jacksonville.
Underwhelmed each time. The only thing I really did like about Jacksonville was the downtown area by the St. Johns River. The whole waterfront area, that's pretty nice. But you get into some of the neighborhoods, it's not worth your time. Jacksonville's crime rate has been climbing at a pretty good pace. In some of the suburbs and neighborhoods, it's been climbing pretty bad. Now, what really gets them on this list besides the crime is their employment. Their employment numbers haven't looked good, and they don't.
That's probably the two big things that you look at when you look at a city. What is the crime like, and what is the unemployment like? And those are generally the two biggest indicators. I don't think I'm breaking new ground and coming with this knowledge that I'm imparting to you, but I think those are probably the two biggest things you look at when you talk about a city, and is the crime rate and the unemployment.
Don't have a lot of really good paying jobs on average. Their income per capita is about 20% lower than the national average, and their poverty rate is almost 15% higher than
this what I'm looking at right here, the palm trees, and this could be anywhere in Florida right here. This doesn't look too dissimilar from Melbourne or other parts of the state.
The national average. From what I've seen, they just haven't rebounded as well as other places in Florida after the pandemic. Granted, the pandemic's not entirely gone, but we're on the downside of it. At least we hope, right? Yeah, so in 2023, if you're going to be moving to Florida, there's better places to choose than Jacksonville. Number 7, Riverside, California.
We'd bring somebody from California in there before too.
Riverside is like in the armpit of California, but to be fair, California has several armpits. This is one of about 12. Riverside is southeast of downtown Los Angeles, and it's kind of where Los Angeles sends all its smog. It's hot, it's miserable, it has a lot of potential, it's just not living up to it. The prices, though, when it comes to housing and cost of living, they act like they're living up to their potential, and they're really not. The cost of living in Riverside is about 25% higher than the
Yeah, one thing about Southern California, which you can count on, unless you're living in the desert, unless you're living on to the east of California, you're probably going to be paying an arm and a leg to live there. You better have a damn good paying job, and you better have a large chunk of change to be able to survive there because it is expensive.
National average, and housing is about 50% higher than the national average. Now, for California, that doesn't really sound like it's a bad thing, but Riverside's out in the middle of the frickin' desert. Almost. Their schools get rated a big F, as does their crime. Their crime is not good. Their violent crime is about 20% higher than...
One of the things you'll notice about California, and I was born there, is that things don't seem like they're about to get better. And the reason is they seem to keep putting the same people in charge to do the same thing over and over again, trying to get a different result. Okay? I'm not saying they need to change parties or do anything like that. That's their call. That's their vote. That's what democracy is all about. But you need to find people in there who, at least if they're in the same party politically as you are, they're willing to change some things to make it better. because California is really going downhill, and it's not doesn't look like it's getting better anytime soon. But again, it's still a beautiful state, and I still love visiting there.
The national average.
I'll just never live there.
And their property crime's about 55% higher. That kind of goes with people not having really good jobs and a high cost of living. They start stealing your junk. Now, I grew up in Southern California near the beach, and I'm a little bit of a snob when it comes to this part of California.
And like I said, I was born in Long Beach, California, which is right in the southern area, and I'm not a snob. I'm going to tell you exactly what it is.
It kind of sucks. And I see it just going downhill all of 2023 and maybe 2024. Number 6, South Bend, Indiana. You ever hear of South?
Now, if you ever heard of South Bend, Indiana, I'll jump the gun before he even brings it up. South Bend, Indiana is the home, and I've been there a couple times. It's where Touchdown Jesus is. It's Notre Dame Fighting Irish. The Notre Dame Club. My oldest cousin graduated from Notre Dame.
Bend? If you're a college football fan or you live in northern Indiana, I'm sure you have. It's where Notre Dame is.
It's where it's up in northern Indiana, but it's also fairly close to Chicago as well, which probably doesn't do it any favors.
So has the St. Joseph River flowing right through town. It is sandwiched between Gary, Indiana, Toledo, Ohio, Detroit, Michigan, and Chicago. It's like kind of in the middle there, a little closer to Gary and Chicago. So it only makes sense this place is going to blow. It wasn't always that way. This was a major industrial manufacturing area back in the early 20th century, even to the mid 20th century. Because of the St. Joseph River, Studebaker, the old car manufacturer, they set up shop there. It still has some remaining large corporations that are based in the area, including Crow, Honeywell, and AM General. You know what else they got? A lot of violent crime, and for some reason these people like to use knives. They have a strange amount of knife attacks in this city. The violent crime rate in South Bend, Indiana is actually 346% above the national average. So it is one of the most
And like I said, where they're located, location. A lot of these, are big city. Now Riverside, Southern California, that's not necessarily a big city, but considering to where it's located and sort of thing, you can kind of understand it.
Safe metro areas in the United States, and nobody ever really hears about it. Their crime rate continues to grow, poverty continues to get worse, and according to Area Vibes, their schools get a giant F. The good thing is they got a lot of things to do and their cost of living is pretty low. Housing, not so much. I mean, you can find a lot of cheap houses here. It's just, do you really want these houses? Look at this purple gem they got for sale in South Bend right now. It's going for $125,000.
I wouldn't pay $125 for that.
It looks like Barbie's substance abuse house. Now, is that purple or is that more of a mauve? Anyway, as long as you're selling
who cares?
Houses like this and you have a crime rate that high, this place is going to continue to go downhill. Number 5, Hartford, Connecticut. If you don't know much about the East Coast and New England in
if you don't know, that's because it's generally very, very expensive.
General, you're probably just by reputation going to think that Hartford, Connecticut is a nice place. I mean, it's in New England. New England is one of the safest.
Yeah, when you look, I've been to New England a couple times in the New England area, and it is very beautiful, very gorgeous. But it is also very, very expensive. So you might get the impression that this is an upper class community, but not so much.
Regions in the nation. They have 3 of the absolute safest states we have: Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. They're 1, 2, and 3 every single year. Connecticut also has some of the richest neighborhoods and towns in the country. Some of the wealthiest people we have living in the United States are in Connecticut. Not many of them live in Hartford, Connecticut.
No.
Hartford, Connecticut is kind of a nightmare.
Now, I've never been to Hartford, so I can't really speak on what it's like to be in Hartford. In fact, I've never been to the state of Connecticut before. But from what I hear, what I understand, Connecticut is you either have a lot of money or you don't have any.
The good news, it's one of the least expensive places to live in New England as far as cities go. The downside is you're taking your life into your own hands. Their violent crime rate is 156% above the national average, and that's up from 120% above the national average in 2019. 2017, it was only 65% above the national average. It's going in the wrong direction. The unemployment is always high. Right now, it sits about 130% above the national average. That fluctuates fluctuates. Next month it could be 110, 3 months from now it could be 90%, but you get the idea. Their poverty rate is also 111% above the national average. This is a major city, at least by New England standards. The town itself only has about 121,000 residents, but the metro area has a little over 1.2 million. I couldn't find any of their major stats that have gotten better over the last 5 years. There's no sign of the suckage to stop anytime soon.
Yeah, but still, if you ever get a chance to visit New England, it's a nice area.
Number 4, Memphis, Tennessee.
Okay, now, I've been to Memphis, and I've spoken about Memphis. Not a shock to see them on this list.
Easily one of the worst cities we have going on right now in the United States.
But it does have Graceland. That's where Elvis is from.
It is catching up with Detroit, and I think at some point it's going to pass East St. Louis as one of the worst cities in the United States. Just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, their crime rate is 237% above the national average. Their violent crime rate is 506% above the national average. There are Mad Max movies with less violence than this city, and it's not going to get any better anytime soon. It's just going to continue to go downhill for some time till they get a handle on their crime. That's the biggest problem here. Well, that and their income per capita house.
Look, when I went to Memphis back in 1989, we also went through it in 1992. Granted, that's a long time ago. I never saw so many. This is generally a good indication of what kind of city you have here. There's probably more liquor stores and strip clubs that I've ever seen in my life.
Household income, unemployment.
Not there's anything wrong with that.
Rate, their schools. The only thing that gets high marks in Memphis is their cost of living. It's pretty cheap to live here. As we all know, a cost of living is a good indicator on how popular the city is. If it's cheap, nobody wants to live there. If it's expensive, everyone wants to live there. Number 3, Little Rock, Arkansas. In 1994, there was a documentary, which I thought was a mockumentary, that came out called Bangin' in Little Rock. And it showed how gang members were in Little Rock and the crime and the violence and the
I've been to Arkansas, but I've never been to Little Rock.
Drugs and all that good stuff. It hasn't got much better. Their crime rate is 186% higher than the national average. Violent crime rate is 377% above the national average. They got serious poverty issues, infrastructure issues, but they do have one really cool thing. Their schools are rated very well, oddly enough. They get graded a B-, and their cost of living's not terrible. But when you got stats like they do, you'd expect the cost of living to be a little bit better than it is. It's 4% lower than the national.
Again, I can't speak on Little Rock, but it sounds like, you run to these cities down in the South like that, and, I'm sure it has its charms. I'd like to visit Little Rock, see what it's all about.
Average, but when you're living in that kind of crime and the housing sucks and the poverty's everywhere, you expect the cost of living to be.
And he's talking about stats, okay? So to sit there and say that it's not, these are cities, and, even the smaller cities or the bigger, Columbus, where I live, Indianapolis, I've been to a couple times. They all have their charms. Okay, again, I can't speak on Little Rock because I've never been there, but Memphis, there are good parts of Memphis too.
There's a trade-off, you want it to be lower. You're just not getting it here. And nothing's going to change here in 2023, I promise you. Number 2, Jackson, Mississippi. So
I knew we'd find Mississippi, on here, because usually when he does these videos, you're always going to find Mississippi and Arkansas. That's kind of like a prerequisite.
Jackson normally kind of sucks, but just recently they had some severe flooding. People have gone without power and water. The flooding kind of went down a week ago, and as of yesterday, the water was restored, but it was still undrinkable. There are only 3 types of people living in Jackson, Mississippi. People that were transferred there from their work, they have family there, or they're on parole and they can't leave.
I bet you there's a fourth of people who were born there and live there. Again, I can't speak on Jackson. When you look at these pictures, it doesn't look bad at all. But, statistics don't lie.
Mississippi is often brought up as the worst capital city in the United States. In case you didn't know, Jackson is the capital of the Magnolia State. All right, before we get to number 1, don't forget we have another channel called On This Day. There is a link down below. We'd love it if you went over there and subscribed. Also, subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. All right, on to number 1. And number 1, Stockton, California.
Well, we got 2 from California on here, so I guess I can't be too shocked about that.
Not many people hear about Stockton, California, unless maybe you're a UFC fan. Two of their biggest stars are from Stockton. Ex-stars, I should say. I don't think they're fighting for them anymore. Stockton is east of San Francisco and Oakland.
And that should give you an idea of why this one is going downhill. I'm going to take a wild guess here that a lot of the problems from Oakland, which has a lot of problems on its own, San Francisco has a huge problems on its own, is probably bringing Stockton down along with it.
But north of Modesto. This whole part of the Central Valley of California is where hopes and dreams go to die. It is surrounded by farmland, and if those farms weren't there, they'd be surrounded by desert. Stockton gets poor grades for their schools, their unemployment's pretty high, their crime rate's pretty high. Total crime rate's 82% above the national average, and violent crime rate is 229% above the national average. This whole part of California is just kind of another part that's failing. Is it failing as bad as, let's say, San Francisco? I don't think so. But I think San Francisco's hit rock bottom, so they're not going to be getting worse in the coming years. They can only get better. Stockton, on the other hand, has a way to go.
And San Francisco isn't getting better anytime soon.
Till they get to the bottom, and I think the bottom's going to come in 23, 24, or 2025. And that's why they're number one on this list.
Okay, this is 10 U.S. cities that are going downhill in 2022, 2023. We'll see how it all pans out. But when it gets to California, I take it kind of a little bit personal, not against him, mind you, but because that's the state where I was born in. Even though I haven't lived there and have no intention of ever moving there, what's happened to a beautiful state like that, the leaders are horrible, in my opinion. Okay, and people keep voting. I mean, the same thing, and when here I'm trying to speak again. The leaders in California are dragging the state down, and the people keep voting them back in. And what do they say? They generally turn and blame the opposite party who has nothing to do with it. And it's just absolutely disgusting. And I hate what's happened to my state, but my home state. But that is what it is. This is World According to Briggs. Please click like, share, and subscribe for him, and like, share, and subscribe for me, and you have a good rest of your day. Thanks for watching.